Sadly, the icons in the game are small, mere 64 by 64 pixels in size. I suppose I could go through and enlarge and sharpen each individual one we'll be looking at in Photoshop to make them clearer, or look up WoW icons that are higher resolution, but I'm not going to. Alright, so let's just set up a little interface here.
Job's done.
Okay, so this is where the icon in question will be, and its original title will be right here. Some of them have interesting names that have changed since the beta. Right here I'll put the file path that the icon is still found in the map files. If you want to use it in your own custom Warcraft 3 maps, you can just type in this path and it'll show up. Some of the files are taken from the beta and are not available, in which case this field will just say beta on it. Alright, let's get this started.
For the Alliance!
Did you know that originally each race had their own set of basic buttons for moving, attacking, stopping, holding position, attacking ground, patrolling, cancelling, and leveling up? They were even in 4 separate colors with different motifs. For the attack action, Night Elves had arrows, humans swords, orcs axes, and undead daggers. I'm guessing this was simply deemed unnecessary and they standardized it all to be just red with some general icons for stopping, attacking, and holding position. Let's talk about Arcanite. In the final version of the game, orcs use Arcanite as their most powerful metal for weapon and armor upgrades. However, the icon's original names tell us that this used to be the top metal in the game for both orcs and humans. This icon for mithril swords was called Arcanite Swords, and this icon is called Arcanite Architecture. The third upgrade icon is still called Imbued Masonry, but the first one is called Stone Architecture, so I'm guessing originally there were only 2 upgrades and they eventually changed the names and then added a third step to the upgrade. If the first upgrade was stone, what were the unupgraded foundations made of, I wonder? It looks like the orcs also had architecture upgrades based on these icons. Spiked barricades probably replaced them. Orcs also had an upgrade for their catapults that used the Steel Thorium Arcanite progression using these icons. Humans had an upgrade for their mortar teams, but the icons only title them Human Artillery Up 1, Up 2, and Up 3. These upgrades are very similar to those in Warcraft 2, which had upgrades for swords, armor, ship cannons, ranged weapons, and siege weapons. Although I think Human's specialty of mithril is more appropriate than Arcanite, I do think it's weird that their path starts with iron instead of steel like the orcs. As I did with the masonry upgrades, I ask, what are their swords made with before they're iron forged? There are other icons that remained in the game but have different names from their current abilities. This lends some insight into the way they were originally intended to be used in the game. For example, Holy Light used to be called Holy Bolt, Flame Strike used to be called Wall of Fire, and Backpack used to be called Pack Beast. I'm not sure if this meant the abilities worked differently or if the icons were originally intended for different abilities or even units, but it's fun to speculate either way. Another upgrade that didn't make it into the game was Advanced Mining. I'm guessing this just allowed peasants to have a higher gold carrying capacity, just like their existing improved lumber harvesting upgrade. Apparently some abilities that now just have a time limit on them used to instead drain mana as long as they were activated, like the Immolation spell. 2 examples of this in the Alliance icons are Avatar and Divine Shield. Both have unused icons for turning them off to save mana. The spell files in the map editor show that they're still assigned, but the abilities don't allow you to turn them on and off, so this is the only way you can see the icons. Divine Shield's on icon is called Divine Intervention. I'm never sure if this is evidence of a different mechanic or just a different name for the ability that ended up in the final version. There used to be an upgrade that increased the sight range of humans' buildings. There were 2 steps in the upgrade which used these icons and were called Town Watch and Town Patrol. The orcs had a similar upgrade, though Blizzard didn't seem to come up with a name for it. The icons are simply called Sight Up 1 and Sight Up 2. Battleships used to have a different icon which focused more on the ship's cannon than a broader view of the ship itself. There's also an icon of some kind of inn. No matching model is found in the game though. If any of you remember way back to Reign of Chaos, priests used to have different icons that showed more of a side profile. I like this one better than the current one, and I have no idea why of all the units their icon was changed when the expansion came along. This is kind of a weird icon. It's just the icon for Firebolt mirrored horizontally, and it's called Fire for the Cannon. No idea what that's supposed to mean, and the only things cannon related in the game are cannon towers. The icon is found in the game itself, though, as a creep version of Breath of Fire. This used to be the icon for the Mana Shield spell, basically just a blue version of this old Frozen Throne desktop wallpaper. You'll note that Blood Mages don't have this ability though, Naga Sea Witches do. This may be the primary reason for the change. It's also kind of vague looking. These 2 units are technically human, so I'll cover them here. Admiral Dalen Proudmoore from the Founding of Durotar campaign for some reason is placed in the world editor with this portrait. I understand that his model is heavily based on that of a paladin, and since he's never actually playable in the game, it makes sense that this would be used instead. Except that this icon exists. I'm guessing this icon was made and then just forgotten when it came to implementing the units in the game's database, because it's a polished icon. The same sort of thing happened for the Terran Marine unit. Its coded icon is that of its model's root unit, the Dwarven Rifleman, but there's a very clear and polished icon for them that goes unused. And this icon here appears to be an Elven Ranger hero, similar to what Sylvanas later became, though it has a look much more similar to the Warcraft 2 Rangers. As we see from this icon and lots of other ones, it's almost like the developers just remade Warcraft 2 and then changed things as they went along to make it into its own game. Maybe that's what they did, but either way, we're left with intriguing remnants like this one. Alright, now we go into some fun stuff. Abilities. There are quite a few abilities that were taken out of the game during the development process. For some, all that remains are icons. For others, special effects. And for others, sounds. This just in, thanks to Hive Workshop user Celendius, we now have some never-before-heard beta sound files. Listen to a couple of these.
Hey, if I don't give you the receipt, it's free. Job's done.
Even more interesting are ability-centered speech effects, which I'm going to refer to as spell cries. From these, we can assume that originally, units would give little quips when casting their spells. For example,
be well.
What's your hurry? See you later.
It's time to get wet.
That's right, sorceresses were the ones who summoned water elementals originally. It makes sense that they limited this to heroes, though. Can you imagine just buying up an army of sorceresses and then having each one summon an elemental? The mortar team used to have this ability called Scattershot, or Scattershot Rockets. An old tooltip reads that it provided mortar teams with an area of effect anti-personnel attack. And there's this unused spell effect in the game files that has the same name. This kind of seems like an earlier version of the later added ability Fragmentation Shards, but maybe it just increased the mortar team's area of effect damage. Or maybe they originally didn't have an area of effect damage at all until this upgrade was researched. There's also this beta sound effect called Mortar Team Death Explode. Maybe they originally exploded instead of slumping over and dying? Or maybe, as on Warcraft 2, they were a demolition squad with the Kaboom ability just like Goblin Sappers have. Speaking of dwarves, there are Dwarf Load and Dwarf Unload buttons, just like there are for peons. These probably paired back with the original War Wagon steam tank idea I talked about in a previous video. Knights used to have a charge ability which used this icon and had this sound effect along with it.
For Azeroth!
I think this would have been an awesome ability for knights. In the final version of the game, they're pretty boring when it comes to abilities. Backpack, yay! While the other cavalry units of other races have abilities that set them apart nicely. This icon's also in the beta files, and it's the same one that's used in World of Warcraft for the Mage's Fireblast ability. Screenshots show it in the Archmage's arsenal, and it was simply called Fireball. Last of all is the Paladin. Remember this attack acknowledgement he says?
Strike with great vengeance!
Well, check out how over-the-top this unused exclamation is.
Strike down upon thee with great vengeance and fury!
Strike forth at thee with my holy power, hammer in your face with great vengeance and fury and might and stuff. This was a spell cry for an ability called Exorcism. Again, probably similar to the spell in Warcraft 2, which dealt area of effect damage to undead, but there's no record of it except for this sound effect and this icon. Paladins also had this ability called Retribution, as well as one called Restoration, which looks similar to Resurrection's icon now. Also, there's evidence that Mountain King's ultimate ability was being able to summon a gold mine. As I suspected in the Models and Animations episode, Riflemen definitely had the Flare ability, possibly instead of the Mortar teams. It had a different sound effect too. I'm not sure what this icon called Expanded View is for, or even what unit or building used it. It's the icon for the ornate spyglass on World of Warcraft. Lastly, I pointed this out in the last episode with a demonstration, but here are the icons for the Spellbreaker's magic defense ability. It's one of the few abilities that is still fully functional in the world editor, just unused. If you played Warcraft 2 and StarCraft back in the day, you'd remember that there were two building options, basic structures and advanced structures. There's evidence that this was originally going to be a thing in Warcraft 3 as well, with this icon called Adstruct. This is somewhat of an unnecessary distinction, especially given the relatively small number of buildings in the game, so it's understandable that it would have been taken out. On the subject of peons and buildings, peons once had upgrades to their mining just like peasants did. They actually have icons for 2 upgrades, as seen here. There's also one surviving icon for a series of orc lumber upgrades. Man, the orcs and humans used to be so similar in early drafts of the game. I'm glad they diverged like they did. Peons also used to have an ability called Salvage, which is probably their equivalent of the undead's ability to unsummon buildings to recoup resources. The orcs' technology tree used to be quite a bit different from the way it ended up. This icon for the war mill is called Forge, and there's a different one called Orc Lumber Mill, supporting the fact that they used to be two separate buildings originally. Also, the icon for burrows is called Troll Burrow, not Orc Burrow. I've always thought burrows are weird anyway. I never considered the orcs to be the type that would dig burrows so they could harvest roots to eat. The bunker aspect of the peons attacking from inside is cool, I guess, but lore-wise, I think pig farms make so much more sense. Maybe it was Blizzard's way of showing that they weren't as bloodthirsty as they were in Warcraft 2. Let's see. Oh yeah, the Voodoo Lounge was apparently set to appear in Reign of Chaos, not just in the Frozen Throne. And okay, take a look at this icon for the Tauren Totem. Take a close... well, as close as you can look at this resolution. It doesn't seem to match the model in the game at all. What's all this gray stuff around here? Some kind of back wall or something? I'm pretty sure they kept the wrong picture for the building, because this is not an icon for a Tauren Totem. This Lost Beta icon is. There are a couple of icons like this that reflect earlier versions of the game. I have no idea why they were left in when more up-to-date ones were made. There's a fair amount of evidence that Blizzard is making a Troll Berserker unit in Reign of Chaos to closely match the same unit in Warcraft 2. This icon was later used in the Frozen Throne expansion for Troll Berserkers, but it's found in the original files for Reign of Chaos with the name Berserk for Trolls. This name was probably to distinguish it from this ability, simply called Berserk, which is obviously for grunts. I'm not sure where it and this Blood Rage ability differ, if at all. There's an older sound effect for some kind of Berserk ability. Ugh, complicated. Well anyway, there's also this ability called Tracking, which says, increases the sight radius of a headhunter by 40 at night. I'm not sure why tracking is only possible for them at night, but a sight radius upgrade is exactly what the Berserkers had in Tides of Darkness, called Scouting. I think what stand out the most in the Orcs icon array are the ability icons. There are quite a few changes seen in the beta, suggesting that the Orc unit's spells and abilities used to be very different. We looked at Call Storm in the animations video, and here's the icon for it. It was apparently an ability for shamans, who were originally called, if this icon's name is any indicator, Spirit Walkers. Here's some other spell icons associated with these Spirit Walkers. Here's a cool icon for a spell called Lightning Bolt. This one's called Earthbind. Though I'm not sure what it did, there is a sound effect for it from the beta files. And this one's called Banish. It's anyone's guess whether this had the same effect as the Blood Mage's ability later on. Originally, the Kodo Beast's drums had two options, Healing Drums Aura and Speed Drums Aura. The two abilities each have on and off icons, so perhaps you could have one or the other on at any given time for a Kodo Beast unit. I kinda wish that some kind of healing ability besides just the higher level Healing Ward spell was available for the Orcs. I think the hardest thing about playing them in Warcraft 3 is dealing with wounded units. The Shadowhunter was added as a hero in the Frozen Throne, but there's lots of evidence that the Shadowhunter was actually considered in the beta for Warcraft 3. Some icons and screenshots show him as wearing a mask, others closer to the maskless version that's on the game today. There are also two icons for unused wards, Entrapment Ward and Grim Ward. No idea what they did, but I imagine that the Stasis Trap is a descendant of the Entrapment Ward. This icon's actually still used in the game as an item called Totem of Might, which gives +1 strength to heroes. Aside from those ability examples, Pulverize used to be called Smash, Burning Oil used to be called Fire Rocks. There's also an old tooltip for an ability called Swiftness Aura, but this is probably just the Tauren Chieftain's Endurance Aura. Speaking of Tauren Chieftains, apparently the Reincarnation ability used to require a certain amount of mana in order to activate. Makes more sense in the end to just have the cooldown be the only factor. Also, Windwalk used to have an on and off function rather than just a time limit. Again, most likely a mana draining over time effect like Immolation. This icon's called Wyvern Taming, kind of a pointless upgrade that was required before you could train Wyvern Riders. And now for some fun with hit animations. Remember these? Well, apparently some units used to have sounds associated with being hit as well. Here they are for your listening pleasure. Okay, before I take a break, I realize some of you may not know how to utilize the paths of these hidden icons. In the World Editor's Object Editor, click the unit whose icon you want to edit and click Icon Game Interface. You can browse most of the game's icons here, but type in a specific path in the Custom field and you'll be able to access the new ones. You can do the same with the model paths mentioned in my earlier models video if you open the field called Model File. Thanks for watching, it's good to be back. I hope to be able to release part 2 soon. Until then, my friends,